Okay. So in the previous class, so I said you about inheritance. So inheritance, you have a different. So there is a different types of inheritances. So like you have a single level, multi-level, okay, multiple. Okay, so based on the reusability of classes, based on the organization of classes, or based on the reusability of classes, you have a different types of inheritances, like single level, multi-level, multiple, hybrid, and one more is what? Hierarchical, right? So, but what is the syntax here is, this is a syntax, derived class name, parent class name, like this. So just here. So what is the advantage of inheritance is? So the advantage of inheritance is reusability. So reusability. So using the content of one class, using the content of one class inside another class, using the content of one class inside another class, that can be done. Yes, for example, suppose okay, assume that okay, suppose assume that so you're developing application. Okay, assume that you are developing one application where you have a different types of persons in your application. There are different types of persons in your application. So assume that there is one person called employee. So there is one person called what here? Employee. You have a different types of people in the application or project. So there is an employee. So what employee is having is, so employee number, employee name, and employee is having what here? Salary. So these are the properties of which one? Employee. So employee is having certain properties. Okay, so what are the properties of employees? The employee is having ID, name, job, and one more is what? Salary. So there is one more person is there who's called as a customer. So what customer is having? Customer is also having name, ID, name, some credit limit. So there is also one more person who's called as supplier. So there's one more person who's called as supplier. So what supplier is having is supplier is having some ID name, and one more is what here, address. Okay. Now, if you see these three classes, there are certain things which are common. Okay. If you see these three classes, there are certain characteristics, there are certain properties which are common, right? So what are the things common here? ID and name. It means, is it these classes are similar type or different type? Similar type, because all these classes are sharing the same properties. All these classes are sharing the same properties. Then instead of writing these properties again and again, you try to put all these properties within one class. Within one class. So what is the name of the class here? Person. What is the name of the class here? Person. So every person in my project is having what? ID and name. So employee inherits what here? Person. So employees inherit the properties of what? Person. Then I don't require to declare here, because employees employee inherited from which class? Person class. So here person is called as a parent class and employee is called as what? Child class. Person is called as a parent class. Which class? So person is called as a parent class and employee is called as which class? Child class. So parent class, and this is what here? Child class. So child inherits the properties of which one? Parent. Child inherits the properties of which one? Parent class. Okay. Means it inherits what? ID and name of person inside what? Employee. In the same way, customer inherited from which class? Person class. So I don't require to write here ID and name. So customer inherit the properties again from which class? Person class. So here again supplier is also person. So supplier inherits ID and name from which class? Person class. So not required to write these properties. So you are creating these properties how many times here? Only one time. You write the methods, variables and methods. What is reusable here? Variables and methods of one class. Variables and methods of one class. What is reusable here? Variables and methods of one class inside what here? Another class. Variables and methods of one class. Variables and methods of one class can be used inside what? Another class. Okay. So how many times you are writing this? Only one time. And you are trying to use it how many times here? More than one time. You are writing only one time and you are using it how many times? More than one time. Okay, right? So you're trying to write it how many times here? One time, and you're using how many times? Number of times. So here, inheritance relationship is what here is a relation. Employee is a type of what here? Person. Customer is a type of what here? Person. And supplier is a type of what here? Person. Employee is a type of what here? Person. Customer is a type of what here? Person. Supplier is a type of person. Okay. So inheritance is between same types. Okay, same type. Same type means person. Supplier is one type of what here? Person. But composition is between unrelated types. For example, mobile and SIM. SIM used by mobile, but SIM properties are not inherited by mobile. Mobile is not a SIM. Mobile has a SIM. Mobile is not a SIM. Mobile has a SIM, but mobile is electronic device. So mobile inherits all the properties of some device, right? So user relation is always between related types, but as a relation is between unrelated types. How? So, for example, okay, for example, so there is a class A. So the class A, which is called as a parent class. So this parent class is having two properties. One is X, and there's one more property called Y. Class A, and A is a parent class. This parent class is having two properties. Okay, one is a X, and there's one more property called which one? Y. There's a class B, and class B inherits A class. Now B is a derived class, and A is what here? Base class. B is a derived class, and A is a base class. So this is called as derived class, or it is called as a subclass. But A is called as which class here? Parent class. Okay, it is called as a base class. You can say base class or super class, or the same thing is called as a parent class. And this is called as which class here? Child class. So B is a child class, and A is what here? Parent class. So child is having properties like self dot P equal to some 300, self dot Q equal to 400. So what will happen here is, suppose when I create B object, so B object, I said B object. Now B is which class here? Child class. B is which class here? Child class. And this B class inherit this properties of which class? A class. Miss X and Y properties of A class are inherited in which class? B class. It means B is having how many properties? Four properties. That is X, Y, P, Q. But X, Y are inherited from which class? A class. Because child inherits. So child inherit all the properties of which one? Parent. Okay. So child inherit all the properties of parent. So OB is a B dot X and OB is a B dot Y. So print OB is a B dot P and OB is a B dot OB is a B dot P, OB is a B dot what is that? Q. and obj b dot x and obj b dot y. So what will happen? So what will happen if I run this? So it is given which error here? Attribute error. So B object has no attribute called what here? X. But actually B is a child class, and the child class inherit X and Y of which class? Parent class. But is it inherited or not inherited? Not inherited. To inherit, it is required to call this constructor method of which class? A class. Inside which class? B class. Until unless you don't call the constructor of A class within the constructor of what? B class, this properties will not be inherited. Okay. So you can call that by using super function. Now here this super will refer to immediate what? Super class. Super dot. Now which method are you calling? Init. Which method are you calling? Init. So until unless you don't call it, now you can see 100 and 200 and 300 and what? 400. It means B object is having X and Y of which one? A. And it is also having its own properties like P and Q. So until unless you don't call, if you don't call it, so those are not inherited. If you don't call it, those are not inherited. So what will happen? B object is created here. So what will happen? B object is created. And this will call the constructor of B class. And the constructor of B class holding the address of B object. And this will call the constructor of which class? A class. And this will hold the address of which object? B object. Because it is called by which one? Init of which class? B class. So here it will create X equal to what? 100. Y equal to what? 200. After that it will return to constructor of derived class. And here it will create two variables. So that is a P equal to 300 and Q equal to what? 400. P equal to 300 and Q equal to 400. The value of X is 100. The value of Y is 200. The value of P is 300. The value of Q is what? 400. So when you read the X value, which is 100, when you read Y value, which is 200, when you read P value, which is 300, when you read Q value, which is what? 400, right? But to inherit the properties of base class inside the derived class, it is required to call the constructor of. See, until unless you don't call this constructor, the properties of base class are not inherited in which class? Derived class. So it is required to call the constructor of base class within the derived class, and that is done by using super. So base class properties, you can say, so properties of base class, properties are instance variables of base class, not inherited automatically, inside derived class. Properties are instance variables of base class, not inherited automatically inside derived class. So in order to inherit properties of base class are super class, inside, okay, derived class. So derived class constructor must call must call the constructor of which class? Base class. So until unless you don't call it, the properties of base class are not inherited in what? Derived class. So, but how this calling is done? How this calling is done? So this calling is done by using what here? Super. So this calling is done by using what here? Super. Now super will refer to immediate superclass. Okay, the super will refer to immediate superclass. And you are calling init method of which class here? Superclass. You are calling init method of which class here? Superclass. So there is a super here. So super function. So actually this return reference of okay superclass object. Now using this object, we can invoke or call the members of superclass within what? Subclass, or what is that? Derived class, or what is that? Child class. So for that, you are trying to use which one here? Super. So this will return the reference of superclass object. So properties will not be inherited automatically. So it required to call the constructor method. Until unless you don't call constructor method, it will not call. But methods of superclass are automatically inherited within derived class, or what is that? Subclass. Methods of superclass are automatical. Methods are inherited. Methods of superclass are inherited automatically in which class? Derived class. Methods of superclass are inherited. Okay, so methods of superclass are automatically inherited within derived class or subclass. So for example, so there is a class A here. So class A is having some M1 method. So this is M1 of A class. So it is also having M2 method. So M2 of A class. So there is a class B inherits A. So there is a method called M3. M3 of B class. So there is also a method called M4. So here I'm saying M4 of which class again? B class. So there is A class and there's B. B is which class? Derived class. And A is a base class and B is a derived class. And this class inherits which class here? A class. So what will happen here is, now methods you can call it. OB is a B dot M1. OB is a B dot M2. OB is a B dot M3. OB is a B dot what? M4. So here I create object of B class, and B class inherit all the methods of which class? A class. So when I say obj b dot m1, so first it look for m1 method in B class. So m1 method is there in B class? No. But B is inherited from which class? A class. So then it calls a m1 method of which class? A class. Then it look for m2 method in which class? B class. So is it m2 method is there in B class? No. Then for B, which one is a base class? A. Then it calls m2 method of which class? A class. Then it look for m3 method in B class. Is it m3 is there in B class? Yes. Calls this m3 of which class? B class. Then it look for m4 method in which class? B class. Is it m4 method is there in B class? Yes. Calls m4 method of which class? B class. But methods of base class are bind with object of which class? Derived class direct. Okay. Yes. Now once you run this, so you can see m1 of A class, m2 of B class, m3 of B class, and m4 of which class? B class. See, methods are inherited. Methods can be called directly, but properties, you have to call the constructor of base class. You have to call the constructor of base class. Okay, you have to call the constructor of base class within. You have to call the constructor of base class within derived class. So what you have to do is you have to call the constructor of base class. Okay, within what? Derived class. So until you don't call it, the properties are not inherited. For example, now this is a single level. This is single level. So this is single level inheritance. So this is single level inheritance. So what will happen in suppose So single level inheritance, like for example, so in single level, there is one base class will be there. So there is one base class and one derived class. In single level inheritance, okay, in single level inheritance, there will be one base class and one base class and one derived class. So what is what will happen here is, so person is having what here name. Person is having name, but this name is private. But how you operate the private members using methods. So I write a method called set name. So this will receive the name of the person. So self dot name, I said self dot name equal to what? Name. So this local variable is assigned to object level variable. So there is a get name, and this will return self dot name. Okay, so this will return self dot name. So there is a setter here, and there's one more which is called as a getter, right? So this is called as a person class. Now there is a person called employee. So your employee is a person. So employee is a person here. So employee inherits properties of which one? Person. Properties and methods. So what employee is having is, employee is having job. Employee is having what here? Salary. An employee also have the properties of which one here? Person. Employee also have employee also have the properties of which one? Person. So here I write setters. Set job. So self dot job equal to job. Okay, set sal. Self dot sal equal to sal. Get job. So return self dot what is that? Job. So here I'm writing setters and getters. So get sal. So return self dot sal. So I create employee one. Employee one equal to what here? Employee. So employee one equal to employee. So what will happen when I create employee? So when I create employee object, this is employee one. So it will call the constructor of base class, and this holds a reference of which one? The red class object, and it will create a name property. And after that, return to the constructor of derived class. And here there are some more properties like job, And there is another property called what? Salary. So there is a property called job and there is a property called which one? Salary. So that is what you're doing. So, but the data is a private. So how you access it? With the help of methods. So I set the employee number. I set the job. I set the employee number. I set the job. And set what year? Salary. Set the salary. So try to assign the values. So try to assign the values like number, job, and one more is what? Salary. So after that, I can read the values. So here I can read. So I can write like this. Employee one dot, get employee number. Employee one dot, get employee name. Okay, so I just store the values. I store the values and I read the values. So employee one dot, what is it? Another one, get a salary. Set name, I think. So name of the employee. So here you can see, this is the name of the employee and this is a job of the employee and this is what here? Salary. So this is what will happen. This is what will happen when you're working with the single level inheritance. See, based on the reusability, you try to organize. So either in single level, multi-level, or multiple hierarchical, that is based on the reusability of the classes. Okay. Suppose if you see multi-level inheritance, multi-level means, so what will happen in multi-level inheritance? So more than one level of inheritance. So more than one level of inheritance is called so multi-level inheritance. More than one level of inheritance is called so more than one level more than one level of inheritance is called multi-level inheritance. Or you can say if a class is derived from if a class is derived from another derived class, even that you call it as multi-level inheritance. If a class is derived from another derived class, even that you call it as multi-level inheritance. It's derived from another derived class. If a class is derived from another derived class, then you can call that as multi-level inheritance. So what will happen here is, so multi-level, right? So there is a person again. So multi-level. So person is having, again I'm taking name and I try to set the name by using self dot name equal to name. So there is a class. So there is a person again. There is a person again. What here? Employee. The employee is a person. So we'll write set and get also. So what employee is having is employee is having a job. So here I'm writing set job. So this allows you to develop similar type classes. So there is a get job and this returns what here? Job of a employee. Now this should call the constructor of which class? Base class. Now there is a one more employee called worker. So worker is what again? Employee. Worker is a employee. Worker is a employee. Employee is a person. So it means worker inherits the properties from employee class as well as from person class. But this worker will not inherit directly from person. Not directly from person, but so this person details inherited by employee class. And from employee class, it is inherited by which one? Worker. So this is called as multi-level. This is called as what here? Multi-level. Okay. So what worker is having? So what worker is having? So it inherits the properties of employee class. An employee inherits the properties of person class. So what worker is having? Daily wage. What worker is having? Daily wage based on the job. Based on the job is having daily wage. So there is a method called set wage. So there is a method called set wage. So I declare this wage as a private. So equal to wage. So there is a method called get wage. So this will return self dot. So wage of the worker. So you have a method called set wage. You have a methods like set wage, and one more is what? Get wage. There is a methods like set wage, and there is a methods like what here? Get wage. So this is what will happen when you are working with multi-level inheritance. Yes, here. But this is how the properties get inherited here. So it is like this. I'm saying worker one. So worker one equal to worker. So here I call the constructor of which one? Worker. And that will call the constructor of what? Employee. And this calls the constructor of what here? Person. Means, so if you create the object of worker, right? So this is a worker one. So this will call the constructor of employee. And this will call the constructor of which one? Person. Actually, here self is referring to the worker object. And inside the worker, it will create what here? Name. And after that, return to which one? Employee. And create what here? Job. Create a property called which one? Job. And then return to the worker and create one property called which one? Wage. It will create the property called wage. Then how can you assign the values? You can write here like this, worker one dot. If I say worker one dot set name, worker one dot set name is ABC, then it look for set name method in worker. Okay, so there is a method resolution order, MRO. MRO stands for method resolution order. What is the order of searching for a method? So first always give the first priority to the same class. So worker W1 is the object of which class? Worker class. So first it look for set name method in which class? Worker class. First it look for set name method in which class? Worker class. Is a set name method is there in worker class? Yes. No. So then next, what is the base class for this? Employee. Is a set name method is there in employee class? No. Then for employee, which one is a base class? Person. Is a set name method is there in person class? Yes. It assign the value. Set name method is there in employee class. So what will happen? It will assign the value. So self dot name equal to what is that? Name. It will assign the value. It will assign the value. Self dot name equal to name. Okay. So name is given. What is the name is given here? ABC. What is a method resolution order? The order of searching the methods. But always the searching of methods done from which class? Child class. If it is not there in the child class, then it look inside which class? Parent class. So child class. If it is not there in the child class, then immediately search in which class? Parent class. If not available in parent class, then it raises what? Error. If it is not there in parent class, then it raises error. So worker one dot set name. So worker one dot set job. So job is given some XYZ. So worker one dot set wage. So wage is given some 500. So then I try to get worker one dot get. So worker one dot get name. So worker one dot get. So get name, get job. And worker one dot get what you are trying to get here? Wage. So worker one dot, all these are belongs to worker. So once you run this is the name of the person, job of the person, and this is wage. So it means if there is any changes in person, what you can do the changes in person. Okay, you can do the changes in person without doing changes in what? Employee and worker. If you do changes in person, those are inherited automatically in what? Worker. If you do changes in employee, that changes will be inherited automatically inside what? Worker. Okay. Yeah, you have to know this. So multi-level inheritance. If it is more than one level of inheritance, then it is called as multi-level inheritance. If there is more than one level of inheritance, then it is called as multi-level inheritance. So this is just based on the way how you are reusing the classes. So there is a multiple. So there is a multiple inheritance. If a class is derived from, if a class is derived from more than one base class, if class is derived from more than one base class, it is called multiple inheritance. So reusing more than one class, reusing more than one class. So that can be called as multiple inheritance. So that is called as multiple inheritance. If a class is derived from more than one base class, then it is called as multiple inheritance. For example, so there will be multiple classes. For example, so there is a class and there is a B class and there is what here? C class. So this is A class and this is a B class. So here, now C inherit the properties and behavior of A class and C inherits the properties and behavior of which class? B class. So C is derived from how many classes? Two classes. So that kind of inheritance, you can call it as multiple inheritance. But what will happen in multiple inheritance? So the class should inherit the properties from how many classes? Two classes. Two or more classes. For example, A is there and A is having a property called X. And there is a class B is there and B is having a property called Y. A is having a property called X and B is having a property called Y. So there is a class C and class C is derived from A and B. Now here C class, call the init method of which class? Superclass. But C is having how many superclasses? Two. One is a. See, one is a. But when you say super here, so what is the immediate superclass for C here? A. So it means it will call the init method of which class? A class. Means X of A is inherited in what? C. But is it Y is inherited? No. To inherit this Y of B class, even I should call init method of which class? B class. To inherit y of B class, I should call the init method of which class? B class. So how you are calling it? B dot. So B dot init. So by sending a reference of current object. B dot init. So you are calling this init with what name? Class name. But sending the reference of which object? Current object. But here the reference of current object is sent automatically. But in this case, the reference of the current object, you have to send it because it is called with what name? Class name. So now C's also have one variable called Z. Its value is 300. So I create object of which class? C class. Then object C dot X, object C dot Y, object C dot which one? Z. But you have to call, but you have to call with what name here? You have to call with what name here? You have to call with the class name. But you can also call with the super. Now this X value is 100, Y value is 200, and Z value is a 300. But here, this will refer to the constructor because the order in which it inherits. Okay, first in which class here? A. The super means immediately it will look for which class? A class. Immediate super class is what? A. Suppose if I am writing here B, now if I say super means it will refer to which class? B class. But if I write here A, then after this which class is inherited? A. Then I have to call here A dot init. I have to call here what? A dot init. A dot init. So that is based on A dot init. But here if I write here A, now super will refer to A class. And this is B. And here I'm saying B dot what is that? Init. You can see X value is 100, Y value is 200, and Z value is what? 300. So super will refer to the immediate super class. Okay, super will refer to immediate super class. Super will refer to immediate super class. Super will refer to immediate super class. Now this is 100, 200, and there's one more value called which one? 300, right? Yeah, we'll see some examples on this, like multiple inheritance, and even we'll see hierarchical inheritance and hybrid, and even we'll see method overriding. Okay, but tomorrow we'll see that how to work with all these things. But this is how you work with the single level, multi-level, and one more is a multiple. But you have to understand methods are inherited automatically, but variables are not inherited automatically. You have to call it, right? So today we'll stop here and tomorrow we'll continue this, right? Thank you.